At 72, I thought I'd seen every kind of betrayal. Then, at my daughter's wedding, my son-in-law slid a folder across the table. Inside were documents giving him control of my home and $32 million my wife had saved. The room was filled with music and laughter, but all I heard was betrayal. He thought I'd sign. He didn't know who he was dealing with. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from in the comments. I sat alone in the living room that afternoon, the quiet pressing down on me like a heavy blanket. The house was still. Too still, the kind of silence that makes you hear your own heartbeat. My eyes fell on the framed wedding picture of Margaret and me, resting above the fireplace. Her smile in that photo had once been the light of my world. Now, staring at it, I felt both comfort and pain. I whispered, almost afraid the walls might hear me. "Margaret, I don't know how we came to this. I gave everything for Emma, and now it feels like I don't matter." The words hung in the air, unanswered, but they were the truth. Memories came flooding back, sharp and detailed. I remembered working double shifts in my 40s just to pay Emma's college tuition, $60,000. That's what it cost back then. Every check I signed felt like a piece of me, but I signed it gladly, knowing it meant my daughter could walk into a classroom and sit among students whose parents never had to think twice about money. I never let her feel the difference. I wanted her to believe she belonged anywhere, that she deserved every opportunity. Then, when she graduated, I surprised her with a car, a brand new sedan that cost me $25,000. I still remember the look on her face, the tears in her eyes when I handed her the keys. She hugged me so tightly I thought my ribs would crack. Later, when she wanted her first apartment, I paid the down payment myself, $80,000 in one single check. Margaret told me I was spoiling her, but I said, "She's our only child. Let her start life with something solid under her feet." I thought all those sacrifices had built an unshakable bond. I thought they were bricks laid in the foundation of our family, but sitting there now, staring at that wedding photo, all I could feel was the sting of betrayal. Marcus, my son-in-law, was circling like a vulture, and Emma, my Emma, was too blind or too trusting to see the danger. The house around me seemed to echo with those sacrifices. Every corner told a story. The oak floors, I installed them myself one summer, sweating and cursing when the boards didn't line up, but smiling when Margaret walked barefoot across them and said they felt smooth as glass. The bookshelf by the window, I built that with my own hands. I can still remember the smell of the wood shavings, the way Emma, as a little girl, climbed onto the bottom shelf pretending it was a stage, singing to us. And now this house, valued at $650,000, was being treated like just another asset Marcus could sink his claws into. It wasn't just wood and paint to me. It was history. It was love, made solid. And it wasn't only the house. Margaret had left behind more than I ever realized. $32 million, carefully hidden in investments, bonds, and accounts. She had managed it quietly, always telling me not to worry, always saying, "Richard, the future will be safe for you and Emma." That fortune was supposed to be a shield, but now it had become the very thing tearing us apart. I could see Marcus's greedy eyes whenever money was mentioned. To him, $32 million wasn't a legacy. It was prey. The shock of Emma standing beside him, nodding when he spoke about family planning, still burned in me. My daughter, the little girl I carried on my shoulders, agreeing with a man who wanted to take away my rights, my independence, my life's work. It was like watching a stranger wear her face. I felt pain deeper than any wound to the body. It was betrayal in its purest form. I had lost my wife to illness years ago, but this was like losing my daughter while she was still alive. For a long time, I just sat there, feeling broken. My hands trembled on the armrest of the chair. My chest was tight. The thought came, cruel and cold. Maybe I should just give up. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was too old, too tired, too worn out to fight. But then I heard Margaret's voice in my head, as if she were standing right there beside me. She had always been the strong one, the one who never bent in the storm. "Richard," I imagined her saying, "don't you dare let them take what we built. Don't you dare let them erase everything we sacrificed." I whispered back, almost choking, "Margaret, if you were here, you wouldn't let them touch this. I know it. I can't either. I won't." The shift inside me was slow, but it was real. From shock, I moved into anger. From anger, I moved into resolve. Betrayal can crush you, or it can sharpen you. I chose the second. I realized I was not powerless. I still had my mind, my memories, my knowledge of this house, these accounts, these papers. And Marcus, he had one weakness. He underestimated me. He thought the old man in the chair was finished. He thought wrong. I looked around the living room again, really looked. The walls were lined with family pictures, moments frozen in time. Emma in her graduation gown. Margaret is in the garden, her hands full of roses. I, holding a hammer, pretended to be a builder, while the two of them laughed at my crooked shelves. Every photo was proof of what we had been, proof of the love and sacrifice that had built this life. The idea that it could all be erased by one signature on Marcus's papers made me sick. But it also made me sharper. I saw clearly what was at stake. It wasn't just dollars. It wasn't just property. It was memory, dignity, and identity. I pulled open the drawer of the old oak desk by the window. Inside were stacks of papers, yellowed with time, bills, letters, receipts. As I sorted through them, my hand touched a folder I hadn't opened in years. It was Margaret's insurance file. Tucked inside, I found something heavier, a small set of keys tied together with a faded blue ribbon. I froze. My breath caught. Margaret had always been careful, deliberate. If she left keys, they meant something. I turned them over in my palm, the metal cool and certain. My heart pounded. She must have left me a path, a protection, something I hadn't yet seen. I sat back in the chair, the keys pressing into my hand, and for the first time since the wedding, I felt the stirrings of power. Maybe small, maybe fragile, but real. I thought to myself, this is not the end. This is the beginning. The sunlight was fading, pouring through the window in long golden streaks that touched the wedding photo above the fireplace. Margaret's face glowed in that light, almost alive. I stared at her, gripping the keys tight, and said softly, "Don't worry, Margaret. I'll find out what you left me. I'll protect it. They will not win." The living room around me seemed to shift in that moment. It was no longer just a place of sorrow and betrayal. It became the war room of a man who had been underestimated for too long. Every object, the chair, the shelves, the photos, was now a reminder of what I was fighting for. I knew then that the next step would take me closer to Marcus. It would take me closer to Emma, and closer to the truth. The stage was being set, not by them, but by me. The papers Marcus had tried to slip under my nose were just the first move. He thought he was playing chess against a man who had forgotten how the pieces moved. But I had just remembered the game, and I had just found the keys that would change it. The chapter of my life where I was passive ended that evening. I rose from the chair slowly, my knees aching, but my spine straight. I put the keys in my pocket, the folder under my arm, and turned off the lamp. Behind me, the house grew darker. Ahead of me, a fight was waiting. And for the first time since that humiliating moment at Emma's wedding, I was ready to meet it head on. I woke before sunrise with the keys on my nightstand and the aftertaste of last night still bitter in my mouth. The house was so quiet I could hear the hum of the refrigerator and the click of the thermostat when the heat came on. I brewed coffee and watched the steam rise like a thin ghost. Out the kitchen window, the maple branches were black lines against a pale sky. I wrapped both hands around the mug to steady the small tremor that comes with anger held overnight. Today would not be about grief or politeness. It would be about control. I laid Margaret's life insurance file on the table beside my yellow pad. set the little bundle of blue ribbon keys on top, and told myself to breathe. At noon, I would meet son-in-law. I would let him talk. I would listen. I would not give up a single inch that mattered. I dressed the way Margaret liked me to dress when something mattered. Clean white shirt, navy blazer, shoes polished enough to catch a little light. I checked my wallet for my driver's license, my Medicare card, Emma's school photo, and the small card with my lawyer Carol's number. I slid the manila folder Marcus had given me across the dining table without opening it and rested my palm on it the way a man settles a restless animal. I left early, not because I was eager, but because I like to see a room before it sees me. The restaurant wore money like perfume, soft lighting, stone walls, a host who treated every word like a delicate object. Marcus stood when I arrived, all bright teeth and open hands. He complimented my jacket and ordered expensive wine without asking what I liked. The glasses arrived with a spill of light across the white cloth, and his smile said he believed the work was already done. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 1 below to let me know you're here with me. He toasted to family and protection, then drew a thick folder from the chair beside him and set it between us with careful hands. Beige, heavy, labeled in tidy handwriting, like a school project turned in for a grade. I opened it. Paper and toner gave that dry, bitter scent. The first page wore a friendly title, Durable Power of Attorney. The second danced the same step, Healthcare Proxy. Then the friendliness gathered into a net, Unlimited Financial Authority, permission to buy and sell property in my name. The right to make gifts, he decided, was in my best interest. The right to choose my living arrangements if he believed safety required it. A notary page waited at the back like a trap already baited. He said these were standard. He said elderly families use them every day. He said the smart time to act is before complications. He said Emma would sleep better. He smiled like kindness had a price tag. He lifted his glass and took a slow sip, then slipped in the sentence that cut like a small knife. You know, at your age, a lot of people have already moved into a facility. It's easier on them. It's easier on the family. He said it softly, as if soft could hide the edge. For a second, I saw the path he wanted for me. A signature here, a stamp there, a suggestion to a doctor that I seemed confused, a listing for my house at $650,000, actual market value at the time, a private room under bright lights. I set my fork down and let the room be quiet long enough to make space for my anger. Then I smiled a small, old smile that did not reach my eyes. I said I liked to understand what I was signing. I said I would have my attorney review it. His smile cracked and healed in the same breath. He said, "Of course." He said whatever made me comfortable. He also said notaries were flexible, and he could bring one tonight if I preferred to finalize while everything was clear. We talked about the weather, and the dessert we did not order until we left felt natural. Outside, the city air felt more honest than the room I had just left. I stood at the corner and called Carol. She answered on the second ring, her voice alert and calm. I told her what he brought, the open authority, the notary on standby, the sentence about facilities that landed like a blade. She did not gasp or curse. She did not need to. She said 3 things in a voice that made my back straighten. Do not sign anything. Keep the folder unchanged. Come to my office at 9. Then she added the sentence that would be my shield. If he calls, tell him your attorney advised you to wait. Use those exact words. I repeated them under my breath as I walked to the car. My attorney advised me to wait. It fit in my mouth like a strong piece of wood, something I could bite down on when the pressure came. At home, I set the folder on the dining table and pulled out my yellow pad. I made a column for questions and a column for action. I wrote the date and time because details are anchors when other things try to drift. Then I walked into the living room and stood in front of the wedding photo above the mantel. Margaret's smile had been a lighthouse when storms came. I told her what he said. I told her he called a cage kindness. I told her I would not let a cage close around the life we built. The house was quiet enough that my words sounded like someone else was in the room, answering back. I slept in pieces and woke before dawn the way old men and careful men do. Carol's office never tried to impress, it tried to be steady. Diplomas on one wall, photos of her kids on another, a watercolor of a yellow house painted by a small hand. We sat at a round table because a round table makes people look at each other. She read quickly, flagging lines with neat red tabs, then set her pen down and looked at me. "This is convenient for him, not protection for you," she said. "If you signed, he could sell your house, move you, and move the money." She picked up the phone and called the bank manager by name, set an afternoon appointment, and used the tone that makes people move. She printed a one-page letter instructing any financial institution that received a power of attorney to hold it pending counsel verification and any notary to call her office before certifying my signature. Then she slid a short form across the table, a request for high-level authentication on my accounts, and told me we would add locks on every door before lunch. The bank manager met us in a glass office that smelled faintly of pen ink and carpet cleaner. He shook my hand and looked me in the eyes. He did not look through me. We reviewed every account. We added notes requiring me in person for large transfers with secondary codes. Wire transfers were disabled unless re-enabled by me with Carol present. He printed confirmations and handed me his card with a direct number. "If anyone shows up with a power of attorney, we will call you and Ms. Peterson before we lift a finger," he said. His voice carried the steady weight of someone used to being careful with other people's money. I slid the confirmations into a red folder and felt a little of the pressure move off my chest. From the bank, we went to the recorder's office in the old brick building with wood counters and a bell that rings when someone opens the door too wide. Carol filed a notice stating that no deed or transfer involving my property should be recorded without verifying with me or counsel in person. The clerk read it twice and stamped it with an official thump that sounded like a gavel. It might not stop a determined thief, Carol said, but it was another lock on another door. On the sidewalk, she asked whether Emma had called. "Not yet," I said. She nodded once. "He will push urgency," she said. "Urgency is a tool. Move at your pace. Slow is your power." Back home, the house felt steadier, the way a boat feels after you shift the weight where it belongs. Late sun slid across the oak floor in long golden bars. I called Emma because silence can be a kind of lie, and I owed my daughter my voice. She sounded bright at first, then careful. I told her Marcus had shown me some papers and that I would be reviewing them with my attorney. She said lots of families use them. She said it would help her help me. There was a pause where a different sentence wanted to live. I could feel Marcus standing in that pause. I told her I loved her and that I was fine. She said she loved me too, but the words were wrapped in worry someone else had given her. That evening, Marcus called. His voice was friendly, quick, a little too warm. He hoped I had looked through the forms. He hoped I understood the value of action while everything was simple. He said confusion only grows with time. He said notaries were flexible. He said he could come by and answer questions. I told him my attorney advised me to wait. I repeated the phrase just the way Carol told me to. He grew quieter at that. He said he respected my caution. He also said some people might start to wonder whether I was avoiding decisions. He did not say the word competence, but he hung it where I could see it. I said I make my own decisions. He said we would talk soon. The call ended with the kind of silence that follows a door someone tried to push and found locked. After the call, I stood with my back against the refrigerator and pressed both palms to the cool door. I said the words out loud because they change when you give them air. I am not helpless. I am not done. The house held the words and did not argue. I took the keys from the drawer and set them in a row on the desk blotter. 2 small, 1 medium, 1 long, and old with a handmade notch. Margaret tied them with that faded blue ribbon the week before she got sick. She had said, "Keep these safe," and I had said, of course, and never asked what they opened. I looked at the keys as if they were a map. The old long one kept drawing my eye. I did not go down to the basement that night. I wanted the opening to be a choice, not a reaction. In the morning, I returned to Carol with coffee and the folder of bank confirmations. We sat at the round table again because strategy feels different when you sit shoulder to shoulder. She had drafted a short letter to Marcus informing him that all future discussions about my finances or living arrangements should go through counsel and that any effort to pressure me would be documented. She printed 2 copies. I signed one for the record and one for delivery by certified mail. Then she slid a small envelope toward me. Inside were simple instructions for my doctor's office. No proxy on file, confirm decisions directly with me, verify any documents with her number before accepting them. Care is a wall built of small bricks. We were laying bricks one by one. On the way home, I stopped at the hardware store that smells like oiled wood and old cardboard. I bought 2 deadbolts and a motion light for the back porch. Back at the house, I installed them with the old screwdriver that still has yellow paint on the handle from the summer we painted the dining room the color of butter, and then changed our minds. I am slower now, but I am steadier. The screws went in straight. The deadbolts turned smoothly. When I flipped the switch for the motion light and it came on, the small burst of brightness felt like permission. I stood at the sink and drank water straight from the tap and let my breathing slow until I could feel the floor under my feet like something solid. Just after 5, a cheerful voice from a notary service left a message saying they were available tonight and could be at my house in 30 minutes. 10 minutes later, Marcus called from his number. He wondered if I had time this evening. He wondered if he could stop by with a notary for just a few signatures. He promised it would take 5 minutes. He said it would be a relief to get this done. I kept my tone level and told him my attorney advised me to wait. He paused, then said he understood, then reminded me again that delays can create confusion. I saved the recordings and texted them to Carol. She wrote back at once, "Do not engage. Save everything. Call me if he shows up." I set the phone face down and went to the living room, where Margaret's picture watched from above the mantel. "We are moving slowly," I told her. Slow is power. Just after 8, a car slowed in front of the house. Headlights slid across the drapes. The engine idled, then moved on. At 8:30, a text arrived from Marcus saying he was in the neighborhood and could stop by if I wanted to talk face to face. I did not answer. At 9, he tried again with a smiley face, as if a little cartoon could press an old man into doing what he wants. At 9:15, he wrote that urgency protects everyone. I placed the phone in a drawer and went to wash the dishes. Silence can be a sentence. Tonight, it was mine. Morning poured across the kitchen floor in a sheet of gold. The mail brought a white envelope from the bank with printed confirmations of the new security measures and the manager's direct number. I slid the card into my wallet behind Emma's photo, the one where she holds a glittered wand she made in 2nd grade. I touched the plastic and whispered, "I love you," to the little girl who could not hear me, and the grown woman who had forgotten for a while what we are made of. Then I set my life on the dining table the way a carpenter lays out tools before a job. Identification copies. The red protection folder. Notes from the recorder's office. The fireproof box opens like a mouth to receive the most important papers. I called my doctor's office and asked them to add a note to my file that all decisions should be confirmed with me directly, no proxy on record, and to verify any documents with Carol before accepting them. In the late afternoon, I watered the geraniums on the porch. The sun warmed my shoulders. A neighbor waved from across the street and asked how the wedding went. "Beautiful and complicated," I said, which is a sentence more honest than most people admit. We talked about the city's paving schedule and whether trash pickup would change for the holiday. We did not talk about $32 million. We did not talk about anyone's hand on my house keys. It felt good to speak in short, simple lines about ordinary things. You can forget that power lives in simple lines until the day you need them again. When I came back inside, the answering machine light blinked. 2 more messages. The same notary service, still cheerful, still available. Then Marcus again, trying the gentler register, saying Emma missed me, saying he wanted to make peace, saying he could be at my door in 10 minutes. I stood with my hand on the back of a chair and listened to the last word fade. I did not call back. I did not text. I wrote the time in my notebook and underlined it. As evening settled, I set the keys on the table in their neat row and looked at them as if they were a map. The old long key with the handmade notch kept drawing my eye. Margaret once told me a good plan makes the right thing easy when the worst thing happens. The worst thing had not happened, but something close was trying very hard to arrive at my door. I walked to the basement door. The air that rose from the steps smelled like cool stone and sawdust. I pulled the chain for the light and went down, one hand on the rail, hearing the creaks. By the workbench, I pressed my palm to the panel that never matched the wall. The seam ran like a mouth. I tried the small key. Nothing. I tried the medium key. Nothing. I tried the old long key. A sound came, half click, half sigh, something that had been waiting. The edge eased out under my fingers. I did not pull it open. Not yet. Upstairs, my phone buzzed. Emma texted that we should talk tomorrow with Marcus to clear the air. I looked at the wood grain and thought of our house, the oak floor I sanded until my palms burned, payments, the $32 million Margaret left to keep me safe. I slid the key back and felt the latch seat. Then I spoke into the quiet, to the woman in the frame, and to the empty room that held our years. They think I'm weak. But the game has only begun. I waited for the house to get still before I took the keys back to the basement door. The steps gave their honest old creak. The bulb warmed the air to a soft yellow, and the panel that looked like every other board loosened when I pressed the place Margaret once showed me. I had the long key halfway into the lock when the phone rang upstairs. The sound carried down the stairwell, urgent and thin. I knew the pattern. Emma. I climbed back up because some calls you answer even when your gut says not tonight. She picked up fast. Her words came in careful pieces, almost gentle, but arranged like blocks someone else had stacked. Marcus says it's important we sign this week. Marcus says courts look at capacity. Marcus says acting now protects everyone. Marcus says. I stood at the sink and watched the yard vanish into a sheet of darkness. Honey, I said, I hear you. I'm reviewing everything with my attorney. I won't be rushed. He's trying to help, she said, and then, softer, people might start asking questions if we wait. People can ask, I said. I make my decisions. There was the small hush that follows a line the other person didn't plan for. I could feel her looking to him, the way you look toward a coach when the play breaks. She told me she loved me. I told her I loved her more than my breath. When the call ended, I kept my palms on the cool counter until the ache behind my ribs settled. It hurts one way to be targeted by a stranger. It hurts another way to hear your own child carry someone else's fear into your kitchen. I went back downstairs and did not pause. The panel swung. The safe door waited like the weather. The old key turned with a low metallic sigh. Inside, folders marked in Margaret's even hand, a black cloth ledger, a small velvet pouch, and an envelope with my name in blue. I sat at the workbench, slid a letter opener under the fold, and heard her voice in the paper. My dear Richard, if you're reading this, someone tried to move you like a chess piece. I built walls. Behind these folders are accounts I kept private for your protection. Total value at my last entry. $32 million held in an irrevocable trust. Only you can direct distributions. Carol Peterson knows the structure. Call her. I'm sorry I waited to tell you. I lived modestly so we could die wealthy. I trust you to use this to keep yourself safe and to be kind where you decide kindness is due. I pressed the page to my chest and let the sting come and pass. Then I opened the folders. Trust papers with dated seals. Statements from institutions I didn't recognize. Notes in Margaret's hand. Dates, names, simple questions for Carol. The ledger recorded years like rings of a tree. The velvet pouch held 2 tiny keys I didn't recognize and a thumb drive labeled in Margaret's neat print. If someone tries to take you, if you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 2 below to let me know you're here with me. I carried the envelope and ledger upstairs and phoned Carol from the dining table. I gave her the shape before the details, the safe, the letter with her name on it, the thumb drive with its bald warning. She listened like a builder listening to a wall settle. "Bring it all," she said. "We'll scan. We'll lock down. We'll make Margaret's walls taller." Her office steadies people. Diplomas, family photos, a watercolor a child made on a Saturday. She treated the ledger like a newborn and plugged the thumb drive into a laptop that had never seen the internet. The screen filled with spreadsheets, scanned emails, lists. There were folders from the last 2 years with names that tightened my jaw. Marcus. A credit pull with markers at 3 casinos, balances past due. 2 short-term loans whose rates looked like punishment for hope. Notes from a private investigator, brief, factual, dated. A copy of an email where Marcus forwarded a template, power of attorney, with our names crudely pasted into the sample lines. In the margin, a note in his own hand, push urgency. Use capacity language. I did not slam a fist or break a glass. Rage spends you. I held the edge of the table and breathed. Carol watched me and nodded. "We'll call the DA," she said, "but first we let him hand us the rope. Document the pressure. Invite his notary into your living room. Let the law watch him work." "Do we have enough?" I asked. "We have enough to start. We need his voice and his pen on his plan." "I can pretend a little longer," I said. "I've already been practicing." She made 2 calls to people who move carefully. Then we copied the files, put the originals in a fireproof envelope, and wrote a short letter from me to him. All conversations about my finances and living arrangements must go through counsel. Any attempt to pressure me will be documented. She sent it certified. I went home and made tea. Coffee was too sharp for the shape of that night. I sat in the lamplight and read Margaret's letter again. "You built walls," I said into the quiet room. "Now we'll add doors that only open from our side." At 9, Marcus called. Warm voice, polished words. He had a notary on standby and could stop by in 30 minutes. 5 signatures, 5 minutes. A relief? Emma worried. The house is too much. Best practices. He stacked phrases the way men stack chairs at the end of a wedding. I told him Monday at 3. I said it like a man too tired to argue, and he purred agreement, sure that the fish had finally stopped resisting. Sunday morning, Emma came by with a paper bag of groceries. She tried to be bright. I made omelets the way I did when she brought friends home from college and wanted to pretend someone else was cooking. She said Marcus spoke too strongly sometimes, but his heart was good. She said conflict made her sick. She said she loved me. I told her love never offends me, only silence does. I told her I would do the right thing for everyone, including myself. Before she left, she touched the envelope with Margaret's handwriting. "A letter from your mother," I said. "One I should have read sooner." She nodded and hugged me, and the child in her beat the man in me like a second heart. Monday at noon, Carol arrived with 2 detectives and an assistant district attorney. No swarm, just people who know how to move in a small house without breaking anything. We set 2 microphones on the bookshelf under the gaze of titles I built the shelves to hold. A camera hid behind the plant Margaret loved. The ADA explained the bounds of the recording. The detectives tested the levels. We walked the plan until it lived in our bones. Before the team left, Carol asked me to name what was at stake. I said the house, last assessed at $650,000, with Emma's crayon son still faint on the basement wall. I said the checking account that pays the tax, the roof fund, and the brokerage accounts Margaret kept quiet. I said the trust totals, $32 million in municipal bonds, dividend stocks, and a cash reserve she called weather money. Saying the numbers out loud steadied me. They were not bragging, they were guardrails. Carol nodded and wrote each item on her pad, not to remind herself, but to help me hear my own voice claim them. We rehearsed the lines he loves. If he says facility, I'll ask which one and at what cost. If he pushes for signatures today, I'll note judges want counsel to review. If he hints I'm slipping, I'll ask for 1 missed mortgage, 1 unpaid tax, 1 bounced check. Carol wrote those prompts on a yellow pad and slid it toward me like a small shield. Then she reminded me to breathe so I wouldn't rush into the trap he set for himself. Last, we placed the people. Microphones on the second shelf, the small lens behind the plant, the corner by the piano where the Ada could step from the shadow without feeling theatrical. When the staging felt right, I stood in the doorway and let my eyes take a picture. The living room would remember its purpose. It had been our chapel when Margaret was sick, our school on long winter nights. Today, it would be all 3 at once. Before they left the room to wait, I took a minute to talk to the house. I touched the reading chair where Margaret used to tuck her feet under a blanket, the doorway where Emma's height is penciled with dates. You've held our holidays, I told the room. Today, you will hold the truth. At 2:54, his car eased to the curb. At 2:56, the notary's sedan followed. At 2:58, my hands trembled, then steadied when I pressed them flat to the table. At 3, the bell rang. Marcus entered with his rented authority and his smooth smile. The notary, a tidy woman with a leather case, followed. He laid the papers out with the grace of a practiced dealer. The notary asked for identification. I gave her my license. She set her stamp down like a small iron, ready to burn. Mr. Collins, Marcus said, this is simple. Your signature here gives Emma and me the authority to support you if anything happens. It protects you from predatory contractors. It ensures the house can be maintained. It's what responsible families do. I slid my glasses on and read a line aloud. Agent may sell, convey, mortgage, or otherwise dispose of principal's real property as agent deems appropriate. I looked up. That's a lot of trust, Marcus. You can trust family, he said, beaming. I turned a page. Agent may make gifts from principal's accounts as agent deems in principal's best interest. I looked again. That's a lot of freedom. It lets us respond quickly, he said. Like moving me to a facility, I said, giving him his own word back. If it becomes necessary, he answered, soft as butter. I let the glasses fall to my chest on their cord. Before I sign, I said, help me understand why your initials appear on a draft dated 2 months before Margaret died, with notes to push urgency and use capacity language. Help me understand your gambling markers and the short-term loans with interest that a loan shark would offer. Help me understand why you told someone that my money would fix everything. For a heartbeat, the only sounds were the refrigerator hum and the tick of the settling floor. His smile stayed, but it no longer belonged to his eyes. The notary looked at him, then at me, then at the papers like they might give her a script. I don't know what you're talking about, he said. I slid a printout toward him. Your credit report, the markers, the loans. And here, I said, placing the messy draft with his initials. The template, same language, same plan. He tried to smooth his voice into reason. He said Emma asked him to help. He said I'd been forgetful. He said I left the car lights on, mislaid a bill, and repeated a story. He said he was protecting me from myself. He built a wall out of words and stood behind it, like a boy behind a sofa during a thunderstorm. If you were protecting me, I said, you would have asked what I wanted. Instead, you brought control to my living room and a stamp to make it permanent. He extended his hands, palms down, as if he could flatten the afternoon. This is normal. It is now, I said, and looked toward the hallway. The ADA stepped into view with her badge, the detectives behind her. Calm voices, careful words. The notary's fingers left the stamp as if it were hot. The ADA asked whether she had felt pressure. The notary said yes, she had, and that she was uncomfortable with how quickly things were being pushed. The ADA told her she would be contacted for a statement and that she was free to leave. The notary left with her case held tight to her ribs. Marcus started talking fast, the way people do when their story leaks. Families do this all the time. He read an article. He was just trying to help. The house needed work. I had funds. He wanted to protect assets. He wanted to protect me. He said protect so many times that it lost its meaning. The ADA listened, then asked one question. Did Mr. Collins have counsel review these documents? He faltered. The room heard the answer in the silence. The detectives collected the papers into a large envelope. The ADA set a card on the table. She told Marcus to consult counsel and that further contact should go through her office. She looked at me and asked if I wanted a no-contact order for peace. I nodded. She said it would be filed by morning. Marcus stared at the envelope like it carried his breath. "You set me up," he said to me, his voice cracking halfway through the sentence. "You set yourself up," I said. "You brought a net and called it a blanket." He glanced toward the plant where the camera hid. "You recorded me." "The law recorded you," I said. "I made tea." He tried one last handle. "Emma loves you," he said. "She wants you safe." "I am safe," I answered. "That was your mistake." The door closed behind him, and the house exhaled. Old wood makes a soft sound when pressure leaves. Carol poured me water and let me be quiet. After a time, I said the part that hurt the worst. "He used my daughter as a messenger." "We'll bring her the documents," Carol said. "Your wife wrote to her. Let the truth be read where it belongs." We made a list because lists give tired hands a job. Send recordings to the DA. Deliver trust documents to the bank so no clerk gets bullied. Notify the recorder that no deed gets filed without me present with counsel. Ask Marcus's last employer to preserve any emails that mention my name. Ship a copy of the notary statement to Emma attached to a short note in my handwriting. "I will always love you. I will not be handled." That night Emma called, crying. Marcus said I humiliated him. He said I broke his trust. He said he only tried to help. I let her talk until the room emptied of the words he put there. Then I told her there were letters and ledgers from her mother that she hadn't seen. I told her I wanted to read them with her, not at her. She said, "Okay," in a small voice. She said she didn't know what to think. She said she was tired. I told her to sleep and that in the morning we would sit where the light is kind and read what Margaret left. At 10 p.m., the house did its dependable chores. The thermostat sighed, the porch light hummed, and the pipes clicked once. I stood in the doorway and looked at the room where a notary had placed her stamp and then withdrawn her hand, where an assistant district attorney had set down a card like a boundary stone, where a man had watched his plan deflate. This room held Christmas trees and birthday candles, I said to the empty chair. Today it held justice. Morning brought a call from the ADA. The markers were confirmed, the loans verified, and the notary's statement recorded. A case would open. The timeline would be careful, not quick. Would I like a no-contact order? Yes. Peace is a door you build on purpose after someone tries to walk through yours. In the afternoon, Carol arrived with a bound copy of Margaret's trust papers in a blue cover that matched the ribbon on the keys. She set it on the table and patted it like a friend. "Your wife thought like a builder," she said. "She built a house inside your house." We spoke of small things because the big things had already been spoken off. Her son finally learned to fry an egg without breaking the yolk. The maple out front will need trimming. When she left, she touched my shoulder and said, "Tomorrow you rest. The day after, we teach." I knew what she meant. Emma would come. There would be papers and tears and silence, and eventually understanding. At dusk I stood where Marcus had stood and placed my hand on the same wood he tried to claim. The grain ran in lines I had sanded myself. "You were our home," I told the room. "Today you were my witness. Tomorrow you'll be our classroom." I turned out the lamp and saw my reflection in the dark window. Older, yes, but steadier. The kind of steady that lets a man stand up in his own life. "He thought I was a helpless old man," I said into the quiet. He was wrong. If you've ever felt pushed aside in your own family, that ache is real and it is heavy. If you believe every person deserves to be seen, comment justice now. Say it for yourself. Say it for someone you love. Now keep watching. We're not done yet. What comes next is how we live with what was almost taken and how we make sure it never is again. When the front door closed behind Marcus and the detectives led him away, I stood in the silence of my own living room. The same room that had once held Christmas trees and birthday candles had now seen a man's ambition collapse like a house of cards. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt the weight shift off my chest. It was as if the air itself was lighter, as if Margaret's letter had been waiting all along for this exact moment. The notary had left quickly, clutching her case. The assistant district attorney nodded and promised follow-up, and my attorney, Carol, touched my shoulder with a simple, steadying hand. The storm had passed. Now came the reckoning. The next morning, the papers arrived. An official no-contact order was issued against Marcus. His signature attempts were logged as evidence. The audio and video recordings were secured by the district attorney's office. My accounts, checking, savings, brokerage were all formally frozen from outside access. I alone held the power to authorize transactions, and the trust Margaret had crafted, the $32 million fortress she built out of years of quiet sacrifice, was now fortified by law. I walked into the bank later that week and handed the branch manager the certified documents. She looked at me with a kind of respect I had not felt from strangers in a long time. "Mr. Collins, everything will require your direct approval from now on," she said, and I nodded, knowing that was how it should have always been. Emma came to the house that same afternoon. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. She sat at the dining table, the very spot where Margaret's letter had been opened, and whispered that Marcus had been taken into custody. She asked me if it was true that he had debts, if it was true that he had tried to take everything. I did not raise my voice. I slid the printed reports toward her, the credit markers, the loans, the draft power of attorney with his initials. She stared at them, her hand covering her mouth. He told me it was just stress. He said you were confused. He said he loved me." "I believe he loved what you gave him," I said. My voice was quiet, not sharp. Quiet words can weigh more than shouts. "But love does not ask you to betray your father. Love does not push you to sign papers that would strip a man of his dignity." Tears rolled down her cheeks. She whispered that she had been blind, that she wanted to believe the man she married was steady, responsible, strong. Instead, she had married a gambler, a manipulator, a predator who had seen her father as prey. In that moment, I did not see my enemy's wife. I saw my daughter, broken open by the truth, and part of me ached to reach across and gather her the way I had when she was small. But another part of me knew boundaries must stand. She would have to rebuild her own trust with me, brick by brick, word by word, action by action. Days turned into weeks. Marcus's case moved forward. He was charged with fraud, attempted exploitation of an elderly person, and multiple counts of financial manipulation. The evidence was overwhelming. The recordings captured his words clearly, his intent unmistakable. The thumb drive Margaret had left behind was the nail in the coffin. It held not only his drafts, but also a record of other elderly individuals he had approached in similar ways. The DA built the case with precision, and when the judge read the charges aloud in the courtroom, Marcus's composure cracked. The man who once smiled like polished marble now stood pale, his hands shaking, his attorney fumbling for words that could not undo what had been caught on tape. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 3 below to let me know you're here with me. The sentence came quicker than anyone expected. 18 years in prison, with no chance of early parole for the first 12. The courtroom was silent except for the judge's voice. Marcus tried to speak, tried to explain, but the words fell flat. His parents, once so proud, left before the hearing ended, their faces gray with shame. Emma filed for divorce within a week. She came to me with the papers, not for my approval, but perhaps for my blessing. "I can't carry his name anymore," she said, and I told her she did not need to. Her name had always been enough. The house changed after that, not in its walls or windows, but in its air. For months it had been a place of suspicion, of whispers, of plans made in the shadows. Now it breathed again. I opened windows and let in the spring air. I walked through each room and touched the furniture Margaret and I had chosen together, the wooden chair I built myself, the bookshelf filled with memories, the photo of our wedding day that still leaned on the mantel. These things had been moments away from being sold, traded, stripped of meaning. But now they remained, not as possessions, but as proof that no predator had succeeded in erasing what we built. Still, I felt the tug of something deeper. Money is money. A house is a house. But dignity, that is the core. Margaret's letter reminded me that our wealth was not just for us. It was for something larger, something that would outlast both betrayal and time. So I called Carol and told her I wanted to move most of the trust into a foundation to protect seniors from exploitation, to provide legal defense, to educate families. "I don't want this to just be survival," I told her. "I want it to be mission." She agreed, and within a month, the paperwork was filed. The Collins Foundation for Elder Protection was born, seeded with $25 million. The local paper ran a story. My photo appeared beside the headline, "From Betrayal to Protection. One father turns family pain into mission." Strangers stopped me at the grocery store to thank me. Letters arrived from people I had never met, telling me they, too, had been pressured, manipulated, nearly destroyed by someone they trusted. I read each letter, some late into the night, and I felt Margaret's presence in every word. She had known, she had planned, and now her vision was alive. Meanwhile, Marcus faded. His name became a warning in the community. His family distanced themselves, embarrassed by the disgrace. He lost everything: his job, his reputation, his home. From what I heard, he now lived behind concrete walls, trading the suit and tie for a prison uniform, his smooth smile replaced by the weight of time. There was no gloating in me when I thought of this, only a kind of solemn justice. He chose his road, and it led him exactly where it was meant to. Emma struggled in the aftermath. She moved into a small apartment on the other side of town. She came to see me sometimes, bringing groceries or flowers. We sat in the kitchen, the same kitchen where Marcus had once whispered poison into her ear, and we talked about simple things: her work, her friends, the weather. She apologized often. Too often. One day I stopped her mid-sentence. "Emma," I said, "stop carrying his crime as if it were yours. You made mistakes. You let him lead you. But you are not him. You are my daughter. That has never changed." She cried then, not out of guilt, but out of relief. It was the first time her smile looked like her mother's again. As for me, I made changes. I sold a small rental property I had kept for years and donated the proceeds to the foundation. I kept the house, but I remodeled the upstairs room into a study, a quiet place with a desk by the window that looked out onto the park. That room became my retreat, my chapel of peace. I filled it with books, with Margaret's journals, with letters from people the foundation had helped. On the wall, I framed a simple phrase: "Respect is the true inheritance." Those words steadied me more than any number in an account. Sometimes Marcus's attorney would call Carol, hoping for leniency, for some sign of softening. Once Emma told me Marcus had written her a letter from prison, claiming he had changed, begging for forgiveness. She asked me if I wanted to read it. I shook my head. "Forgiveness is not a letter," I told her. "Forgiveness is boundaries, and my boundary is no more contact." Ha! I did not hate him. Hatred ties you to the one who hurt you. I was done being tied. Evenings became my favorite time. I would sit on the porch with a glass of iced tea, listening to the neighborhood children play, the sound of a basketball hitting pavement, a dog barking down the block. Simple noises, but they carried freedom. The fear of losing everything had passed. The fight was won. Now was the time to live, not just exist. One Sunday, I visited the new office of the foundation. Volunteers were sorting pamphlets, lawyers offered free consultations, and a group of seniors sat in a circle sharing their stories. One woman said her nephew tried to sell her farm without her knowing. Another said her son-in-law had taken her pension check every month. They looked at me as I entered, their eyes full of recognition. "You're the reason this place exists," one of them said. I smiled and answered, "No, Margaret is. I just opened the safe." "Andy?" The room laughed softly, and I felt warmth spread in me. It was not pride. It was peace. As weeks turned to months, I realized I no longer woke with dread. I no longer sat at the kitchen table wondering when the next blow would come. I had weathered betrayal, seen justice served, and turned pain into purpose. The ghosts of Marcus's ambition still whispered sometimes, but they no longer haunted me. They reminded me instead of how far I had come, how strong the walls Margaret built truly were. At night, I sometimes whispered into the quiet house. "Margaret, we did it. They thought I was weak. They thought I would fold. But we stood, you and I. We stood." And I imagined her smile, soft and knowing, the smile of a woman who had planned far ahead, who had trusted me to carry it through. The truth is, betrayal cuts deep. It tells you that blood is enough, that family cannot fail you. But the reality is harder. Blood is not always love. Family is not always loyal. And sometimes the ones you trust most are the ones who test you hardest. I learned that respect is thicker than blood, that truth is stronger than lies, that dignity is the inheritance no one can steal. So now I live not as a man broken by betrayal, but as a man remade by it. My house is mine again. My accounts are safe. My daughter is slowly rebuilding her life. And Marcus, he is where choices take men like him. I end each day with the same thought. I do not need their apologies. I do not need their words. I have myself. I have my dignity. And that is enough. "I don't need them anymore," I whispered last night as I closed the study door. "I have myself." And tomorrow I will meet with the community group at the park where seniors gather to plant flowers and share stories. That will be the next chapter. A lighter chapter, one that begins not with betrayal, but with growth. The first morning in my new apartment, I woke to sunlight streaming across the floorboards. The place was modest compared to the house where I had spent most of my life, but it was mine, fully mine, untouched by schemes or betrayal. The realtor had told me it was worth about $220,000. To me, its value wasn't measured in money, but in peace. The kitchen was bright, the windows opened onto the park, and the sound of birds carried in the morning air. For the first time in years, I felt that the walls around me kept me safe, not caged. I brewed coffee, sat by the window, and let the steam rise into my face. Outside, children ran with their parents, a dog chased a frisbee, and an older couple walked hand in hand. Life was still beautiful, I thought, even after betrayal, even after the sting of being seen as nothing more than a burden. Life had its own rhythm, one that no schemer could truly take away from me. Each sip reminded me that I was no longer living under someone else's shadow. The Collins Foundation had already begun its work. My attorney, Carol, had taken charge of the legal side, and volunteers had stepped forward from the community. I visited often, not as a man weighed down by bitterness, but as someone who had survived and now wanted to help others. Each story I heard from those seniors reminded me why Margaret left those letters, why she trusted me to carry out her vision. One woman said she had nearly signed away her farm to a manipulative nephew. Another man confessed he had let his daughter take control of his pension until nothing was left. Their voices trembled with shame, but I told them they had nothing to be ashamed of. Trust is never a crime. Betrayal is. Living here, I no longer measured my life in what was lost. I measured it in what remained, what could still grow. I joined a community gardening group in the park across the street. My hands dug into soil, planting flowers and vegetables alongside men and women who carried their own scars. Together we laughed about small things, traded recipes, and even planned a picnic. I realized healing does not arrive in one dramatic moment. It arrives in the steady company of people who see you, respect you, and ask for nothing more than your honest self. I kept Emma in my life, though carefully. She was trying, working a job, paying her own rent, learning to stand without Marcus. She visited me on Sundays with a bag of groceries, insisting on cooking lunch. Sometimes her hands shook as she chopped onions, sometimes her eyes watered from more than just the food. But I could see her growing, like a young tree finally finding its roots. She apologized less now. She talked more about her own future, her plans, her small joys. And that was enough for me. Marcus's fate was different. The last report I heard confirmed his 18-year sentence had begun in earnest. The state prison walls had swallowed the man who once strutted in suits and smiled like he owned the world. His family distanced themselves, embarrassed by the scandal. Emma had filed for divorce, and the paperwork was final. He was alone. His empire of lies collapsed into dust. Some nights I thought about him, not with hatred, but with a kind of detached sadness. The man had talent, charm, intelligence, the ability to read people, but he had used those gifts to manipulate, to gamble, to prey. Now he lived in a cell, trading those polished shoes for concrete floors in prison bars. That was justice, not revenge. Justice meant he could no longer hurt others the way he had tried to hurt me. I never responded to his attempts to reach me. Once, Carol told me he had written a letter begging for forgiveness, claiming he had changed. I shook my head. Forgiveness is not a letter, I told her. Forgiveness is living without them. Boundaries are what protect us, and my boundary was clear. I had closed that door forever. One afternoon, as I sorted through the mail at my new place, I found a letter that stopped me cold. It wasn't from Marcus. It was from a man I had never met. He wrote that Marcus had once tried to swindle him too, convincing him to invest in a fake project. He had lost thousands, but after hearing about the trial, he felt vindicated. He thanked me, not because I saved him money, but because I helped stop Marcus from hurting others. His words pierced me, softer than Margaret's, but almost as powerful. Because of you, he can't hurt more families. Because of you, I can sleep again. I sat in my chair, holding that letter, and tears fell. For once, they weren't tears of anger or betrayal. They were tears of meaning. The fight, the pain, the humiliation, it all had purpose. Margaret's vision had not just saved me, it had saved others. In moments like that, I realized the betrayal had not defined me. My response to it had. And the lesson was clear. One I wanted to leave behind for anyone willing to listen. For parents, it is this: never let love blind you to wisdom. We must help our children, yes, but we must also keep our eyes open. Boundaries are not cruelty. Boundaries are protection, both for them and for us. Do not hand over your life with blind trust. Keep your dignity guarded, even from those closest to you. For children, the lesson is different, but just as sharp. Gratitude is not optional. Respect is not a choice. It is the minimum a child owes to the one who raised them, fed them, and sacrificed for them. A parent is not an ATM, not a burden to be managed. A parent is flesh and blood, history and sacrifice, a person who deserves honor even when age bends their back. And for this modern world, where greed wears suits and betrayal hides behind smiles, the lesson is sobering. Money can make people forget their own names. It can blind them to blood, to promises, to vows made under God. But character is the one currency that never loses value. In a world full of quick deals and empty words, the truth still matters. Integrity still matters. And those who forget it will always pay a price, sooner or later. My own days now were simpler. I woke early, walked through the park, and greeted neighbors. The apartment was modest, but the view from the balcony was priceless. In the evenings, I sat in my study chair with Margaret's old clock ticking beside me. That clock, its brass face polished and steady, reminded me of time's gift. It did not stop for betrayal, nor did it rush for healing. It moved steadily, asking only that I keep pace. Sometimes I whispered to Margaret as I closed my eyes, "We made it, love. We didn't just survive. We found peace." And I imagined her smile, that steady smile that had seen me through harder storms before. One Sunday, during a community meeting, a woman came up to me. She had gray hair tied back in a bun and wore a plain blue dress. She pressed a small gift into my hands, a hand-carved wooden cross. "For strength," she said, "for what you did." I held it and felt a kind of warmth. It was not the wood that mattered. It was the reminder that people saw me, not as a victim, but as a man who had chosen dignity. As spring gave way to summer, I planted a small garden on my balcony, tomatoes, basil, and a few flowers for Margaret. I found joy in watering them, watching them grow. Each morning I touched the leaves and thought, growth is possible, always, even after betrayal, even after loss. The final thread with Marcus snapped when Emma brought me another envelope. It was from him. She said he begged her to give it to me. I looked at the seal, then handed it back. "I don't need it," I told her. She nodded, no longer pressing, apologizing. She understood. That was the end. Truly the end. Now, when I lie down at night, I do not replay Marcus's words or Emma's tears. I do not see signatures or courtrooms. I see sunlight over the park, children laughing, my daughter slowly rebuilding. I see Margaret's clock, steady as ever, and I feel free. I have said it before, but it remains the truest thing I know. I don't need their apologies. I don't need their explanations. I have myself. I have my dignity. And that is enough. Every morning when I walk in the park, I remind myself, each day is proof I chose the right road. I finally found the place I belong. Family, I've learned, is not just blood. Family is those who respect you, and character, above all, is the inheritance no one can ever steal. The story has come to an end. I hope it has brought you valuable lessons and insights. If you enjoyed this content, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next video. Goodbye, and see you again.